Well, few cities embody American urban decay more depressingly than the city of Baltimore does. Once one of the great American cities, its poverty rate now is more than 10 percentage points above the national average. The murder rate is barely below the figure for Venezuela, as embarrassing as it is to say out loud. It spends more on schools than the national average, and yet 6 of its schools in the city have 0 students proficient in reading or math. By the way, the city has been controlled by Democrats for decades. Kurt Anderson represents Baltimore in the Maryland House of Delegates. Says it's time to rethink this a little bit, this arrangement. Delegate Anderson joins us tonight. Mr. Anderson, thanks a lot for coming on. So,
thanks for having me.
I don't think it's a straight line between the political party in charge and the problems or, you know, the good parts of a city. But I do think over time maybe you can acknowledge that things are not working and it's time to change. I never hear people say this. You are saying this. What led you to that conclusion?
Well, number one, it's clear that when you have a murder a day in Baltimore City, that things are not going the way that we want them to go. Democrats, as you say, have been in charge in Baltimore for a long time. I'm not saying that that is going to change anytime soon because most of the Republicans have left the city. Right. What I'm saying, though, is that we can still work with people like President Trump or our Governor Larry Hogan with regard to bringing in the kinds of resources that we need to help try to solve the problem. One of the resources would be money to put computers in police cars. A simple thing like that. I think probably in every jurisdiction across this country, police have access to computers on a regular basis right in their cars. We haven't been able to afford that in years because of the mounting debt that the city has had, and we've had to basically work step by step. So these are the kinds of things that we're willing to work with, obviously, other parties across the party line to try to solve in Baltimore.
So you just feel Baltimore's only an hour north of where I am right now. I know a lot of people who live there. A lot of nice people in Baltimore, but the murder rate is ridiculous. And because of Baltimore, your governor said, look, we need gun control, real gun control in the state. So you got it. They banned a whole class of firearms. And so our producer, Charlie Cougar, went back with a calculator today, and here's what he found. In the 4 years preceding that ban on weapons that your Governor O'Malley put into place, in the 4 years after that, homicides went up 25%. I'm not saying the ban caused the murders, but it did have the opposite effect. And I wonder if maybe reversing some of these counterproductive gun control measures, allowing people to defend themselves, might be called for.
Well, unfortunately, Tucker, people are defending themselves with guns in Baltimore. That's where the murders come from. Rival gangs are armed and they're shooting at each other, and not only hitting themselves, but hitting innocent bystanders. There's a 3-year-old child that was killed in my district. That was a very traumatic experience for all of us, and she was just sitting on her front steps. I'm not so sure it's time to revisit the gun issue.
But that's kind of my point, though, is that gang members don't care what laws you pass, of course, because by definition they're scofflaws. But normal people, like, you know, the law-abiding people on the street, they don't want to break the law, and now they can't defend themselves. So if the gun control measures in place work, why did the murder rate go up after they were passed?
Well, I can't respond to that anomaly. I mean, maybe an anomaly, I don't know. I do know that citizens in the city of Baltimore are allowed to carry guns, keep guns in their homes, just like anybody else in this country. It's a constitutional right. What our police commissioner wants to do, Kevin Davis, is to say that if you wear, carry, or transport a handgun, and you don't have a permit to do so, then you ought to be subject, at least on the second offense, to a felony and be incarcerated a certain length of time. He believes that the people who are carrying guns openly on the streets are the ones who are creating the violence. These are the people that we want to get off the streets and hopefully start dealing with some of this violence in our streets.
So whenever I've talked to politicians, with the exception of you, from Baltimore, they have, to a person, been focused on national issues. We spoke to a city councilman from Baltimore a couple of months ago, and he was all spun up about federal immigration policy and sanctuary cities and all this stuff. And I asked him at one point, like, you know, your city's got a lot of problems, like real problems, in your city. Why aren't you focused on those? But he seemed much more intent on making sort of grand statements about the world and thinking globally and all that. Have you noticed this trend?
I saw the interview. It was very entertaining. Good job. But no, the folks who I work with in the state legislature who represent Baltimore City, other city council members, including our president, Jack Young, and our mayor, Catherine Pugh, are fully focused on this issue. Look, when a person is murdered, they have a family. There's a funeral. Most of us go to these funerals. In some cases, these are people, children of people that we know. It hits us directly. I've lived in the city for 60 years. And I love Baltimore City. We've got a great sports venue. We got restaurants. Little Italy, you've probably been there.
It's a cool town. I agree. Yes, I agree.
Right, but there are parts of this town that are very dangerous, and that reputation is what puts the entire cloud over Baltimore City. We take this very seriously. It's a murder a day, and you don't think we're outraged? Yeah, I wish you guys would come down here and spend a week in Baltimore. Bring your show from D.C. down to Baltimore for a week and just see the stories that go on. There's some good stories, too. There's some bad stories. But, if you can take the show to London for a terrorist attack or whatever, we're having a terrorist attack in Baltimore City every day. And it is something that we cannot tolerate. And I would love to have you guys come down here and examine it even more closely.
And I would love to. Let me just ask you one quick question. Maybe it's a much longer answer than we have time for. But when you had the civil disturbances in Baltimore a couple of years ago, I sent some reporters out. They were beaten up. It was a big deal. I watched the cops in Baltimore just kind of stand there as the rioters torched a bunch of stores. Why would you put up with that?
We don't. And the Department of Justice, the City of Baltimore, and the Baltimore City Police have entered into something called a consent decree that deals with helping to train police officers how to respond in those particular situations. Our police officers at that time were woefully inadequate in terms of controlling the crowd. They didn't have the right kind of equipment. They didn't have the right kind of leadership. Hopefully we've learned from those mistakes, but certainly that was a very dark day in Baltimore history. We don't want that to happen again.
Well, you're an honest man. Delegate Anderson, thanks a lot for joining us tonight.